I'm gonna show you how I just did that. Color correction and color grading are some of the most confusing parts of making videos when you're starting out as a new creator. Lots of people still making videos with their webcams or just upgrading to big boy cameras for the first time don't even know what color grading means. Basically, it's taking the footage that your camera captures and enhancing or grading the colors. You can even use color grading to create what's called a LUT or a lookup table, which can be used in videos as well as in OBS for you to apply the color grade live on stream. It's an intimidating process, but there's a completely free program I use to edit my videos called Davinci Resolve. It just so happens to be one of the best color grading softwares in the world. And today I'm gonna show you just how easy color grading in Resolve really is. Welcome back to Crash Course Content. My name is Noah, but you can call me Neat, and let's jump right into Davinci Resolve and get to grading some footage. Okay guys, first things first, in Davinci Resolve, you're gonna want to take your footage and throw it in your timeline and get what's called a hero shot, which just has everything that you want to grade in the shot at once. So here I've struck a pose for us and given us a thumbs up. I recorded this using my GH5 in what's called a Cinelike footage. Or Cinelike recording type thing. It's a little bit like log, if you've ever heard of log footage, but it's not quite the same. It's a little bit different. Basically, log costs money and Cinelike is free. If you're brand new to Resolve, basically you're gonna go to the media tab, drag in your footage down here in this box over here, come to the edit tab, drag it onto the timeline, and then throw your playhead over wherever you want just click on this timeline, throw your playhead wherever you want your hero shot to be. So then we're gonna click over to the color tab and things are gonna change drastically very quickly. This is probably the most overwhelming page in all of Davinci Resolve. Like even the Fusion tab, which has like very advanced like After Effects type stuff, is less overwhelming than this huge like spaceship of a dashboard here. But coloring is actually deceptively simple. So we're just gonna go step by step. So the first things first is we got our clip selected. Basically, since we have our hero shot lined up here, we can come over here to clips in the top right, click it and get rid of that altogether. When you open this up as well, something resembling the timeline is gonna be open. You can click that off as well. We want to keep nodes open because this is going to be basically our workspace for all the color adjustments we do. We want our preview open, obviously, but right here we've got our media pool, which has all of our different video feeds. We can close that too because we only want to grade this shot. I'm going to come up here to the zoom levels and set it to fit. That way we get a nice zoomed in look of our shot so we can see it all at the same time. In the bottom left here, we have probably the scariest part of the entire page. It's called the primary wheels. We're gonna worry about these later. This is where a lot of our color adjustments are gonna come from. Here we also have, I believe it's curves by default, but I had it clicked onto qualifier. Basically, these are all of our secondary tools. These are gonna help us choose which part of the picture we're gonna wanna grade at what time. And then down here in the bottom right, you're probably gonna be on the parade by default, but these are basically your scopes. These are gonna show you some data about the color in the image. So we're gonna be using these to monitor the image as we grade it, because you probably don't have a professional monitor for color grading. You probably also don't have a professional eye for what professional color grading looks like. But these scopes will look the same no matter what your monitor settings look like. In fact, some of the most professional of colorists could probably go without a preview and grade simply on the scopes. The first things first, we're gonna start with these nodes on the right here. These are where all of our adjustments are going to happen. This first node, I like to leave blank because I like to have a node we can click back to and see a preview of where we started at any given time. So we're gonna leave that alone, and then I'm gonna hit Alt-S to create what's called a serial node. Basically, here is our input, and here is our output, and everything in between goes one by one, making adjustment after adjustment one by one. And the point of that is we can go anywhere down the daisy chain and adjust something later on if we make a different choice with where we want to take our image. So for example, if I want to up the contrast a hell of a lot, But that makes it harder for me to really get anything out of the image. Later on, I can come back and say, okay, maybe I don't want the contrast so high. And each one of these is independent and only affects itself. If at any point you've done what I've done and you just completely fucked everything up, you can always just right click in this space and hit reset all grades and nodes, and that will reset you back to square one. So the first things first is I'm gonna create a serial node, and the very first thing I like to do is I like to figure out the contrast. Now, the curves section is actually pretty good at showing you the contrast. This is the low section, and this is the high section. Now, normally, when you're recording, you might see your lows somewhere in this area and your highs somewhere in this area. If that were the case, we normally drag our highs in to about right there and our lows into about right there, wherever the mountain starts to hit. But with the type of exposure that I have, and with the settings on my camera, I've actually kind of dialed in the contrast perfectly. And so I'm not gonna mess with the contrast, but just in case, I'm gonna leave this node here in case I wanna mess with it later. So the second node here I'm gonna add is gonna be for saturation. The Cinelike logs on the GH5 that I'm using and the actual V-log settings on most cameras tend to desaturate and bring down the contrast of what your camera picks up. And the reason they do that is because they're actually recording a lot of data at the same time, but it's just being compressed into a format that looks desaturated and looks low contrast for the computer to interpret, when in actuality, this has more color data than a typical video does. What that means is we can reintroduce here, if we go to our corner here, make sure we have the 1 clicked on our color, beneath our color wheels in the primary. If we go, make sure 1 is ticked, we'll see saturation appear here. If we start to crank this up to about 80 or so, we'll see we get a lot more of that color back in. This is looking a little bit more like what a natural image would look like. So once you've got contrast and saturation reintroduced to your picture, you'll realize that this is the most of color correction. By the way, I haven't really explained what the difference is between color correction and color grading. Color correction is basically correcting the colors so that they look more like what you would expect your eyes to see if you were in the room with the subject being lit. The goal is to nail natural looking skin tones, natural colors, a full color spectrum, perfect contrast, all those things. And then a color grade is sort of taking what you've corrected and giving it sort of an artistic touch. So maybe like increasing the saturation even more, adding some shadows and adding some green and blue to the image to give it kind of a cool cinematic look or whatever. But your first priority should always be correction, and then taking that correction, working with the grade. So I'm gonna continue with the correction process, and then once we're done, we can start looking at what I want to grade. So like I said, this is already a pretty darn good correction here, but I can tell looking down, if we take a look at our scopes and we go over to Vectorscope, it's gonna look something like this by default. We're gonna come over to these little lines with the dots, the sliders for adjusting the settings or whatever. And we are going to hit show 2x zoom, and we're gonna hit show skin tone indicator. What's gonna happen is this line is going to appear in our vector scope. That is called a skin tone indicator. It turns out, no matter what your ethnicity, we're all actually the same color when it comes to skin. It just so happens that people who are considered black just have lower saturation in their skin tones. Basically, the more melanin you have in your skin, the less saturated your skin tones are. So you can see there's some guides here. These letters stand for colors. Here's red, here's magenta, here's blue, obviously. You'll see that skin tones lie somewhere between yellow and red, with a little bit closer to red. So what we wanna do is, you can see my skin tones are all around right here. We basically want to take my skin tones and move them a little bit more towards yellow so that they line up a little bit more on this line. You don't necessarily want them to be split by the line. You don't necessarily want the skin tones split by the line. You want them almost to sit closer to wherever the ambient light takes them. And since the ambient light of this scene has it more towards the magenta, I'm probably going to leave my skin tones a little bit to the right of this line. So what we can do to start adjusting the skin tones is I'm going to go and I'm going to create another serial node by pressing Alt S. And now, since I want to adjust only my skin tones, I'm gonna press Alt L, and that's gonna create what's called a layer node. So basically, everything on this bottom layer, it's kind of counterintuitive. This bottom layer will always be applied on top of this top layer. So for example, if I go to this layer on top here and I start adjusting things and I go really wacko, you can see it's not adjusting the image at all. You can see it changing here in the node, but it's not adjusting the image at all because this layer is on top. It's only if we hide the bottom layer where you really see what we're doing on top. So what that means is we can come to this bottom layer and we can come down to our qualifier box down here. Then we can change our selection range to be just the skin tones. So let's pick the color picker here. I'm gonna slide that along my forehead here. Now, if we hit Shift H to show just what the node sees, you're gonna see some nightmare fuel here. Basically, this is our selection. So I can see because of the blue on the left side of my face, I didn't get a whole lot of the left side of my face here. So I'm actually gonna zoom in a little bit and take this qualifier and drag it across my forehead just a little bit more thoroughly this time. A little bit more of that. You can see now I'm starting to select more of the background of the things in the image. Don't worry too much about those things because for the most part, what you grab is also going to benefit from you color correcting your face. So we can say that it's a little bit of a rough selection still. So I'm gonna come over here to the feather tool and I'm gonna drag the feather across my skin. And again, we're gonna select some of the background, but I'm not gonna worry about it too much. I'm also gonna slide it along my arm and my hand to make sure we get as much of that as possible. And you can see we still have some of the skin deselected, but that's fine because those are gonna be graded later by the other colors we select. We're just gonna come over here to the matte finesse. And we're gonna add some denoise, and we can crank that up quite a bit, so around 20 or so. It just depends on what exactly your selection is. And the blur radius we can also crank quite high. This makes sure that we don't have any harsh, stark contrasts in color by having a really distinct key. So now that that's done, if I hit Shift H and I begin messing with the colors here, you'll see it's only messing with my skin tones. What that means is we can start grading, we can start correcting my skin tones independent. We don't have to worry about it messing with any of the colors of the background. For example, if I started trying to correct my skin on our original color correction node, I started bringing my skin a little bit more towards yellow here, you're gonna notice as I go back and forth there, that the background is gonna get a little bit more green and the magenta is gonna lose a little bit of its saturation. And I really just don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna stick with just changing the colors on my skin. Boom, look at how smooth that is. Just look at how delicious that looks. I like to start when it comes to skin tones with making adjustments to gamma and gain. Basically, all you have to know about these sliders right here is that the sliders actually are kind of the brightness setting. So if we crank the slider up here, you'll notice my skin gets a lot brighter, a lot more exposed. This reset button here in the top will always reset that specific wheel. And this color wheel here, as you grab this thing in the center, you'll notice it starts to shift the color. So for my skin tones, I notice they're a little bit, just a tad on the dark side. So I am gonna boost the gain just a little bit. The gain is generally where your highlights, where the brightest, the whitest parts of the image are. And I'm gonna do the same for the gamma. Gamma is generally the mid-tones. It's also generally where your skin tones lie. I'm gonna boost the gamma just a tad as well, I think. That looks pretty good. Now from there, I'm gonna actually start adjusting the color here. We definitely want it a little bit more to the left. So I'm gonna start moving the gamma more towards yellow, maybe a little bit towards orange until they just sit barely on the line there. And I think I'm gonna do the same with gain. Now this is a little bit too yellow for my taste, a little bit too amber, a little bit too warm. So I'm gonna hit reset there. Another thing we can do is with skin tones here, I can set the temperature of just the skin tones a little bit warmer if I wanted to. So if we had something go, if I didn't set the temperature of my camera correctly to my lighting, I could adjust it here. I generally don't mess with lift at this stage because lift is a lot of the lows. And you see it, if you can see it on the color, you can see it on the Vectorscope there in the corner. It does a lot of change whenever you mess with lift at this stage. So I like to leave lift alone. It usually keeps some of the darker areas of your skin that would normally be edited, these dark blacks in here, usually keeps them the same color if we don't mess with the lift, which is generally where your shadows lie. And instead we can just stick with gamma, just correcting where we need to. I'm starting to like where that's sitting. If I have to get super specific, you can actually go up to these 3 white dots up here, and click over to the third one, here we see it changes the names of these circles from lift, gamma, gain to shadow, midtone, and highlight. So this allows us to edit them a little bit more finely. These are a lot less sensitive. You'll see if I go over to gain and I start to move it towards blue, I start to look like, oh, what's her name from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory? I've got a blueberry for a daughter. That girl. I start to look like her pretty quickly. So we're gonna hit reset. But if I go over to highlights and I start moving towards blue, you'll see I'm already way over to where I was, and I'm not nearly anywhere. I'm already almost to the edge of the circle, and you still aren't seeing a whole lot of blue come out. Now, if I start moving into magenta, you can start seeing some weird stuff happen. You've got pretty good skin tones. The ambient light looks correct. This is about what it looks like when you're in the room with me. So this is about what we could expect out of a color correction. However, I am not satisfied with my stream looking like just this, or my YouTube videos looking just like this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these nodes and I'm gonna move them up. And I'm gonna click on our layer node here and hit Alt-S to create a serial. This is going to be the last of our color correction. And so I'm gonna move a new node. This is going to be the beginning of our color grade. So even though they're duplicates, I like to keep an end to the color correction and beginning to the grade. So I'm gonna create a new serial node. Now, what I'd like to do with this is I would like to start correcting some things like the background as well as my teeth. So I said it in my lighting video. I drink a lot of soda and I haven't been to the dentist in a long time. So I'm pretty unsatisfied, especially because I have white headphones and a white chair, how much my yellow teeth clash with both of those things. So I'm gonna try keying out just my teeth. Now they're pretty close to my skin tones, so this might be kind of difficult, but we're gonna see if we can give it a shot and grade my teeth to be give them a little bit of a white pop. So again, I'm gonna Shift H to make sure we're looking at what we're keying, and I'm gonna grab just the teeth here if I can. We grab a little bit of the skin, that's okay, because we're gonna just add just a little bit of gain to these. So the main thing is that these are colored yellow, so I think what we can do is we can take away some of the saturation. Again, come to page 1 here. I think I'm gonna bring that down to like saturation 30 or so. And then that makes it all look a little bit dark. So I'm gonna take the gain and I'm gonna raise it up just a tad to taste. So now if I hit Shift H, you can see just how much. You can see it changed my skin very little. It didn't make me look pale at all, but that just boosted the way I'm way happier with the way my teeth look now. I don't want it to look totally unnatural, so we're gonna bring that down. I'm also gonna zoom in, make sure it's not super grainy. So you can see there's some grain to my selection there. So I am gonna come in, make sure to denoise this quite a bit, and about right there-ish, and give it a little bit of blur as well. Make sure it looks a little bit more natural. You can see here, that's about what we did. So next, now that we're looking at things that are white, I think I wanna key out my headphones and anything else that's white in the image and make sure that they are really just a clean, pure white that sticks out. You can see here my headphones, if you look closely, they're a little bit of a magenta hue from our lighting. So I wanna change these, I wanna key these out and get just a really big pop of white. So I'm gonna serial node, I'm gonna do the same thing we did for our skin. I'm gonna key out just the headphones here. Hit Shift H, see what we're working with. Now I've selected way too much. So what we can do here is we can actually come down to the qualifier down here. We can adjust our selection manually. So since I know where I'm picking out white, I wanna bring down the saturation just a tad. You can see some of the background starting to disappear now. I also know that they end up a little bit on the magenta side, so I know we can bring back our hue selection quite a bit. I also know, since it's white, that it's some of the most illuminated parts of the image, so I can bring back the luminance quite a bit as well. And now we see just the white parts of our image starting to stick out. So I am, for the sake of this key, going to bring down the softness, or bring up the softness on the low end, and go ahead and bring the luminance all the way up to make sure we get all of the whites. So now I'm gonna add a little bit of denoise and a little bit of blur as always. And once again, just like the teeth, I'm gonna reduce the saturation to around 30 or so and boost the gain. Okay, now if I hit Shift H, that looks nice. So now we can see just how much we made those whites, those big highlights pop. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and keep boosting them a little bit. I don't even mind if they clip a little bit. I just love that clean look. I love the clean look of the whites there. The last thing I think I wanna do is I think I just want a lot more just color pop out of this image. As you guys know, I'm all about this kind of neon aesthetic, and so I really want to punch this color in, just really bring in the flash. So I'm gonna once again hit Alt-S for serial node, and now I want to key out my skin again. And so what we can do is we can actually come up here to our skin qualifier from earlier when we were doing our color correction. And we can grab this little blue square right here and drag it to the blue arrow on our new node. This carries the alpha, carries the key, carries the qualifier from this node to this node. So you'll see now if we hit Shift H, it selected my skin again. So what that means is on the node beneath the skin, we can go and we can start editing all the colors, and it's gonna leave our skin tones mostly intact here. So what I think I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna very simply just start upping the saturation to my tastes. Okay, I've brought it to about 70 here, and I think that's where I like it. You jump back and forth between these two, you can see just how much color I added. Just for the last look over, I'm gonna look down at our vector scope back to the parade, make sure that none of our colors are super out of whack. I really don't know how to much read the parade, so this isn't actually very useful to me, but I do know that we generally like the most of our colors to be around the 256 to 384 mark, and that does seem to be where the majority of our colors lie, especially in the reds and greens where our skin lies. The blue is all kinds of out of whack because of the background and whatnot, but we're not gonna worry about it. I like coming in here in the waveform and clicking on the Y, which shows you the composite, which shows you things like this is actually kind of like a grilled down version of the image. You'll see the skin tones are in the middle here because my skin is in the middle of the image. It's like looking at a 2D representation of all the colors in the image. It's kind of wonk. You can see the blue-green here coming from my microphone, as well as the huge highlight coming from my LifeX beam here. All right, so I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Let's go step by step once again through our nodes and see just exactly what all we did. This is how far we've come. This was our original image. This was our original color profile. This was our contrast node, which we didn't end up having to edit. Here was our colorization node that added a little bit of saturation back in. Here's our skin node, which keyed out our skin and added some of the skin hues back in. That was the end of our color correction. Then we moved on to the color grade. We pulled out my teeth so that my teeth would be just a little bit wider, give a little bit more pop. Then we moved on to my headphones, and all the whites in the image made those pop a little bit more. And we added some saturation underneath the skin tones so that the ambient light would be much more saturated. And this was our final image, which I think I'm satisfied with. All right, so the last thing we gotta do is I gotta show you guys how to apply this across all of Resolve so you can import this to other projects. And I gotta show you how to apply it to a LUT so that you can import it into OBS for your live streams. So if I wanted to take this color correction and I wanted it to apply it to any other clip, there's several ways to do this. The first is to simply in the edit tab of Resolve, come over here to the tab that is color corrected that you want it, hit copy, go over to the tab you want corrected, hit paste attributes and click color correction and hit apply. And you'll see it's color corrected. If you want to color correct between projects, it's a little bit more complicated, but not by much. I'm gonna show you exactly how. Come over to view on any tab and click show power bins here near the bottom. That's gonna become important here in just a second. Come over to our effects library, scroll to the bottom here to effects and grab an adjustment clip. You're gonna take the adjustment clip, put it anywhere in your project. Next, you're gonna take your clip that's color graded, hit copy, come over to your adjustment clip here, right click and hit paste attributes. And once again, click color correction. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our media pool over here. We're gonna click on power bins. And we're going to drag our adjustment clip into the power bin. And now we're going to rename it color grade. And now what we can do is we can open up our power bin in any Resolve project and our color grade will be here to drag over any footage in Davinci Resolve. Now you can simply throw the color grade over anything you want graded, or you can right click from the color grade, hit copy, and then paste attributes as normal. The last method can actually be done inside the color tab. You want to select the clip that you want graded, right click on the clip that's already graded, and hit apply grade. Boom, it even copies over all of our adjustments here. The last thing you can do if you really know that you're gonna be using this exact color grading in multiple videos, you can simply right click here and hit generate 3D LUT. I find 33 point cube to work the best. This will automatically save it to Davinci Resolve's LUT folder, which then in any other color tab in any other project, you can go to LUTs and scroll and find whichever LUT that you just saved. These LUTs though don't work in OBS. So if we want to apply this to our stream, we still have some work to do. First, you're going to come into OBS. You're gonna come to any source, right click and hit filters. You're gonna hit the plus sign here and hit apply LUT. What you're gonna do is gonna hit browse. And now you're gonna take this path and you're going to copy it. Now you can open up a regular file explorer and paste that in there. I like to do that just because it gives us administrator access. We can move this all around and we don't have to worry about OBS. And you can see there's already some pre-made LUTs here for you to try out in OBS. We're gonna take this one that's called original.png here, and we're actually just gonna drag it into Resolve into our timeline. And of course, we're gonna come into Resolve, click on the LUT, and apply our grade. So next we're gonna come into the Deliver tab. We're gonna click on individual clips here, come down to format and click on TIFF. I don't know why we're restricted to TIFF. I don't know why we can't go straight to PNG or whatever, but we gotta go to TIFF first. Got RGB of 8 bits. We're gonna click on render at source resolution here. That will make sure it retains the dynamics here. Next, we have to choose our location. Now, it doesn't like you to save your LUTs directly in the OBS filters LUTs folder because you need like administrative access to it, and Resolve doesn't have that by default. So we're just gonna go into a subfolder within it, select that folder. I'm gonna hit add to render queue, and it's going to add it to render queue over here. And we're just gonna hit, actually, before I do that, I almost rendered out the entire timeline. That would have been embarrassing. Instead, I'm gonna zoom out, make sure that I come over to our PNG here of our LUT, and I'm gonna right click here, hit mark in, make sure we're only rendering out the LUT. Now let me go into our LUTs folder, and we've got the TIFF file. We need to transfer this into a PNG. So you can use whatever you want for this. In fact, I'm just gonna use Microsoft Paint to do it pretty easily. I'm gonna hit edit with Paint 3D. Once that's done, I'm gonna go to menu, hit save as, image, and just change it to .png. And then save as type PNG and hit save. So the concepts we just covered can be applied to almost any shot for any project. My advice is to take your camera or your phone out and just take a bunch of pictures of a bunch of different subjects. People, places, animals, anything that will let you shoot, and bring your photos back to Resolve to grade. You'll be a professional colorist in no time, and you'll be grading some of the best looking YouTube videos and Twitch streams on our corner of the internet. In the next video on Crash Course Content, we'll be grading some stills provided by the community. And I'll be throwing the LUTs we make up for free for you to use out of the box. So please head down there and hit the subscribe button, and be sure to ring that bell to make sure you don't miss that video. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on my Discord, or if you want your stuff graded by me personally, you can hit me up on Twitch, where I'll be doing a 24-hour stream on Halloween, where we'll be grading some more stuff posted by you guys completely free of charge. Thank you all for watching, and as always, it's 5 o'clock somewhere, so have a jazzy night.